This is what happens when you give all of your Battlestar Pegasus parts a good coating of gunmetal. It's not going to be the final color. It's more of a base for all the colors that are to come. It's fairly decent outside today, so I was able to spray a coat on everything. The bits that have been built up to a certain point. I was most interested in getting the undersides of this covered because I'm going to be covering them with engines, and when I do, I don't want any bare plastic or primer gray to show through there. Like I say, a lot of this is going to get covered up again, but this gunmetal is going to act as a base color. It is very toy-like. I really don't care for the finish of it. It's meant for automobiles. It's a car paint. So what happens when you spray it on models is that it looks overscale and clunky and toy-like and all the things you don't like. So what it's going to do is act as a base, and I'm going to put some subtle Model Master colors over it that'll hopefully add a sense of scale to it. And then when I knock down, I know it's supposed to be metallic, but I'm still going to knock it down with a flat to kind of minimize the glossiness of it after the decaling goes on and the painting goes on. Then I might hit it with some metallics at the end to kind of bring up some accent, but I really don't want this shiny look the whole time that I'm building it. Show you some little bits along the side to see where it's at. And here you can see what's happening with the landing bays. The landing bays have to be, well, obviously you're painting bits of it, but the insides need to be a flat primer gray to accept the decals that are in there. Now I have got some overspray on these bits, so now that I can see what needs to stay gray, I can go back over that with the primer and just hit these gray spots, and then I will be able to gloss it, put the decals on it, and then cover it up, not permanently, but cover it up for the rest of the build so that I don't get anything on it. Continuing in the odd journey that is building this Pegasus model, again, weird thing about this is it's calling for you to apply finished decals in what would be way early in the construction phase. So it's kind of out of my comfort zone, but that's what we've got to do. These decals go on the bays like such. Actually, they go on this back wall here, so that when you either look in through the bay, you see the illusion of the bay continuing. So what does that mean for us? Well, it means for us that we have got to clear off these spaces here, and that doesn't show. This is about where the decal, one of the decals, is going to go, but it needs to be sprayed with a gloss first so that this decal will lay nice and flat. So that's the next step, is to take all of these back walls and all of these landing bays that are going to get decals and spray them with a gloss finish. Probably leave that overnight and do the decaling in the morning. And what you can see over here is, of course, all of the engines in place. This is the it's become very back heavy now because all of the engines are in place, and there's still detailing to be done back there. But now that I've got this much done, I can start spraying in some shadows and some artificial shading, and then playing with adding highlights to it. You know, some of the comments I get are about the quality of the videos, and it's a question of, hey, how come you're filming in the dark? Well, I'm not in the dark. I've got room light, I've got fluorescent light, I've got the computer here, but apparently it's not enough for the camera to pick up. So until I get some, you know, professional lighting equipment, this is what you're gonna get. And trust me, not seeing the full picture is not robbing you of anything. So this was a weekend where I work in agriculture, so I pick up a lot of farm sayings. And one of the most famous is making hay while the sun shines. Well, today the sun was shining and it was fairly warm out, so I put the prawn on back burner a little bit. I've been cleaning it, cleaning the parts and doing some research, but today was mostly about the Pegasus because I was taking advantage of the sunshine for once and the mild temperatures to allow me to do a lot of the bulk spraying that I need to do, that I know those days are rarer and becoming more and more rare. So that's why I worked on the Pegasus as much today as I could. Well, welcome back. It is Sunday, just a bit afternoon, and I'm getting down to doing the decaling on the landing bays as promised. And I've got the victims all laid out here. These are the pieces 22, 23, 24, and 25 that get the launch bay decals. And then the undersides of these have been sprayed gray and covered with a clear coat of gloss to help the decals stick better. They are flat. The decals are flat. They are not going around a lot of curves. That eliminates one problem, but it also adds another. So while I don't really have to worry about it trying to form around a shape or around a contour, I do have to worry about trapped bubbles. So what I'm going to do is, of course, you slide them on very nicely and you squeegee out all the bubbles that are underneath them. But, you know, it doesn't hurt if you have a very, very sharp X-Acto knife, just to have, just in case you need to have one handy, just in case you have to poke a bubble to let the air trapped underneath it out. And then we'll see whether or not we need to put any Solvaset on it. I don't think we will, because like I said, they're not having to form around a shape or anything. There's no crannies for them to settle down in. But we'll see how that goes. Yes, you see it glossy now, and that's because of the gloss shine. But let's start cutting out some decals and putting them down. Okay, here's something I noticed. I pulled out the decals for the upper landing bays, which they're distinctively bigger than the smaller landing bays, and they're left and right, front and back. But this one has a pin right here. There's a pin right there that this decal needs to go over. The decal makes no mention or no indication that has to be cut out, but it certainly does. I don't believe that it is. Let me see, this would be the only other one that it would fit, and the only other one that it would fit is the same size, so yeah, it has to be cut around that pin. So let me take my sharp knife, I'm glad I got out, and do that. I don't know if you can see all the way down in there, but yeah, where that pin comes down is way behind that wall, so that's not really going to impact how the decal looks, but that's the decal in place. I just had to snap the bay over top of it just to check the placement and make sure everything was hunky-dory. Okay. Something else I learned from doing the first two bays is that every little speck of dust or schmutz that is under the decal is going to poke up and make the decal not fit flat. So I took a very fine sanding sponge and lightly went over the areas just to knock down, and those were really little bits of the clear finish, little bubble and clear finish or whatever, that I needed to knock down so that the decal would lay flat over it. Here we have all four of the landing bays with their landing strips on them, and now we turn our attention to doing the back wall decals. To the landing bay front wall decals, it does get really confusing really quickly if you don't keep everything straight with your port and your starboard and your upper and your lower. So basically what I did is I cut everything off that said port, and I worked on the port nacelle first, and just to make sure it was the port nacelle, I test fit it back onto the ship because sometimes I don't know my port from my storyboard. I wish they would have just said this goes with part number 20, because you got the parts out, you've got them open while you're decaling. It would have made as much sense to put, hey, number 10 goes on part 20. Number 9 and 10 go on part 20. It would have been a lot less confusing than port upper, starboard lower. Although it would be as nautical, but not as nice. Well, go ahead and shoot some video of these decals in place now, because once the model is done, you're going to be hard pressed to see them. But I will know that they are in there. That's the decal on the back wall. And of course, once these have had a chance to dry, I will hit them with a flat coat, top coat, so that it knocks down that shine and it doesn't look like a photo or a decal in there anymore. But you can see they follow the illusion pretty nicely. And it's important that the decal, if you're going to cheat it one way or another, they fit very well, but if you're going to have to cheat them one way or another, it's best to cheat them down or to the bottom, because that's the part where it has to meet the launch deck, and that's where the illusion is either going to make it or break it, depending on whether or not those two decals meet up. So you've got a decal that's on the floor and a decal that's coming up. Here's the floor, and the decal is coming up the back wall, so you really don't want to see any gap between those. You want that to be as seamless as possible, so you want the decal to kind of slide. And like I say, if you have to cheat it one way or another, cheat it down towards the floor so that you don't end up with an ugly gap there that looks like a model part. Well, thus endeth the decaling work on the Pegasus for today. I'm going to let these sit overnight. They've been put in place. They've been a little bit of the solvaset just to scooch them up into the angles there and make sure that they stay where they're supposed to stay. And I'm going to leave them alone now. Here are the decks I went last time. But I'm going to leave these alone, and I am going to make use of the semi-temperate weather outside to do some more cleaning on the Christopher Johnson District 9 figure. Before I take this apart to take outside and do some cleaning on it, I wanted to give you some sort of sense of the size of this beastie. He's quite tall. Now, the tallest thing I'd built recently was the robot. Here's the robot, thank you very much. And then of course there's Batman. Batman comes up to about here on Christopher Johnson. He is quite tall. And I'm still thinking how the best method is to paint and work on him. Now he's not attached to the base. I still have to trim down this post a little bit so he'll fit down on the base. But I'm thinking what I want to do is join this much together and work on that as a unit, and then work on the arms and guns separately. I was thinking maybe I wanted to work on the torso and the head separately, but then I've got nothing to hold on to it with while I'm moving it around, and having it joined to the hip actually lets me work on it in place, such as it is. Now I'm going to work on the construction of the tentacles before I attach it to the hips, but it's a question of putting this hand on the gun since it's molded into it already. So that's going to be one thing, and then I'm going to add the details onto the gun after it's been primed. I had thought about all of those little canisters have to line the top of those, and I was wondering what the best way is going to be to do that. I'm still trying to scratch my head and figure out how the best method of attaching, or where in the procedure. You can see I've kind of penciled in areas that are going to be orange as opposed to the rest of it that's going to be white. It's going to be interesting. I may say things now that I may change my mind on later as far as methods. But while the sun is still shining outside, I want to do some final cleanup on the torso and the arm sections and get at least the legs and hip. I want to get those glued together, and I want to get the tentacles on the face today, and I want to get the arms glued together even if they're not glued to the body. Okay, I've got the legs and the pelvis glued together and down on the base, and this is how it is meant to fit on the base. You can see the detail coming up between the toes, and this back leg is sitting where it's supposed to sit, but it is up off the ground a little bit, and I'm wondering if they're trying to emulate a pose where he is, you know, getting ready to pull up that right leg or not, because it does touch in a couple of key spots back there. So like here on this toe, that's meant to be hitting the ground. So I'm wondering what the thinking was as far as why these other toes aren't either hanging down as gravity would indicate, or whether they're not touching the base. So I think what I'm going to do is just simply build the base up. I'm going to put some epoxy sculpt or some other putty in there, probably the white plumber's putty, the Loctite stuff, because it's cheaper and dries faster, and I can just put some there, mush the foot down on it, get a good imprint, and pull it back up, and then sculpt around it. But yeah, I'm not wild about that particular part of it because it just doesn't look stable. It is stable, it's attached where it should be, but where that toe would be wouldn't be on the same plane as the rest of those toes. It would be hanging down a little bit. So I think the easiest thing to do would be to build the base up around that. But this is good and solid now, and ready to support the weight of the torso. But the torso needs some cleaning. This is only loosely standing together and could fall apart at any moment, but I wanted you to see what the kit looks like when it is more or less stood together. Of course, you can see the wrist is not positioned. What I'm going to do is, like I said before, was to do the arms and gun separately from the rest of the body. Boy, in every series of putting things together, there's always one joint that has to be played with. The arms, of course, I fit into the shoulders as tightly as I could. The elbows are as tight as they can go. This kind of floats in the gun kind of floats in his right hand as far as cradling it, but that left wrist, that since the hand is attached to the gun as a part, the left wrist going into that sleeve is the one that has the most amount of potential wiggle room. So I just hollowed it all out as much as I could, and then positioned the rest of the joints so that they all worked and lined up. But then that last joint going up the sleeve there, I just held it in place, glued it, and then jammed a bunch of this epoxy putty in there into place to smooth it out and fill in the gaps. There's going to be gaps when you're putting these pieces together. This kit fits together excellently, but even at that, there's still some, excuse me, I got something in my throat. There's something like above that knee. You can see the join line there, and that's going to have to be filled in with some epoxy sculpt. So the secret at this point is to, now that I've got everything in kind of position, I take the arms back off and I can work on his feelers around his mouth. And then I'll be ready to put a coat of primer on it, and that primer will show up any seams that still need to be sanded. Well, that was nerve-wracking, but fun. All of the little tentacles and feelers and doohickeys and antennae are in place on the head, and now that they are secured and glued in at least in one place, I can try to touch them up and clean them up, and then I'll wipe them down with a little bit of an astringent to clean them off so that the paint will stick to them. But you can see how delicate all those little doodads are now. So I really don't want this thing rolling around like this, so I'm going to go ahead and attach it to the waist, and now I've got a steady, solid platform to work from, or from which to work, if I am speaking correctly. Here's a good look with at the full prawn with the antennae and the greeblies on. It's sort of like a deranged Dr. Zoidberg. But I'm going to do this much in one assembly, and then here is the there's the right arm, and here is the left arm with the gun. Okay, the fun part is now we get to put a little bit of color on our creature. I'm going to use the sandable primers like I have in the past, but this one is actually a reddish terracotta color, which is more in keeping with the final tones that I want to use on Christopher. Not going to use the gray this time. White wouldn't do me much good either, and black is maybe too severe. So we're going to go, and I'm just going to do light coats, and I'm not going to get all the way down to the ground. Well, I might, but the goal for this is try to maybe do it from the waist up. So just light coats. And really looking at where the seams are, because that is what I'm trying to see, is how well I did as far as cleaning up the seams. I don't want to cover up too much of the surface texture. So here is a completely unintended result. Ironically, when I put the brownish sandable primer on it, it has the unintended side effect of making him look a bit more like a shrimp, and calling into question even more the prawn insult name. So it was not intended, but he does look a little bit delicious at this point. So this wraps up another weekend as we are getting closer to Christmas, and I am pulling out the appropriate Grinchware. Sorry for the little bit shorter report today, but as the days go shorter and get colder, there's less I can really do. I've got the Battlestar well underway. I did not get towards any of the painting of the sides of it that I wanted to do today, but you take things as the weather will allow them. And this was a good day to get Christopher Johnson cleaned up while I could do it outside and let the dust fly, and then to get a good coat of primer on him that can be curing over the days to come. So it's all a work in progress. I don't have a specific plan as to today I shall do this or finish that. So I did get the decals on the Battlestar, and that's good to let that sit up overnight. And I've got the primer on Christopher Johnson, and that's a good weekend's work. So until next week, I will see you then.